Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. I am Hannah Broderud.
I'm Luke Freeman.
And I'm Chris Province. Gosh, good to see you guys. Thank you guys for being here today.
Yeah, good to see you
It's
both.
good.
Yeah,
Excited.
Yeah, like for context, it's been sleeting the last 2 days, and
Yeah.
so we all trenched into the studio this morning because Hannah, like yours was the only flight that made it yesterday.
Yeah, I think the
Tell me
only
how that's
flight
possible.
that landed in Tulsa is the one I was on, and it wasn't the one I was originally supposed to be on.
Yeah.
We had other team members whose flights got canceled and returned, and nobody else made it. But I was on a flight with the South Dakota Jackrabbits. I think they may have had something to do with it.
Right, because they had to play the ball game.
They had to play the ball game in Tulsa today, so
Right.
they flew the plane so that the college boys could play.
Well, thank you to all the Jackrabbits and
Yeah.
United Airlines for being so committed to getting those kids here.
I mean, the whole thing yesterday, though, I will say we had some other people whose flights got canceled that were supposed to be here with us. So that's disappointing. But my takeaway after I reflected on it overnight was it's a great example of like why we do the work that we do. Because yesterday in Tulsa, Oklahoma, God knows how many people worked for hours to clear a runway for
Right.
one flight of 60 people to land.
Right.
No other airlines executed on coming in. So like,
And this was not a flight of 60 people. This was a flight of maybe 30. It was a
okay, even better,
tiny plane.
even better. So this entire huge operation, I mean, relative,
Right.
Tulsa Airport, not huge compared to, Chicago O'Hare or something, but this big operation all day long, hours of work, preparation, everyone keeping the lights on in this building for 30 people, and everything else was canceled. So like this lack of communication between other airlines, what was their intent? What were they going to make happen? What crews were they going to keep around until the runway was ready? Like total entropy, total breakdown of
Right.
efficiency, and everyone lost money yesterday.
Sure.
Tulsa lost money, the airlines lost money, passengers obviously didn't get the outcome they needed. And I'm like, oh yeah, the world is not efficient.
Right.
We still have a lot of work to do, right? There's communication to build, there's trust to build, there's systems to build, there's shared purpose to build. So, that was my takeaway from just like all it took was one day of bad weather.
Right.
And this whole thing fell apart. Like that's all it took. And it was like 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
That's all it took.
Yeah, well, we'll kind of put that crisis leadership on deck for another episode. But yeah, it's crazy that how important that shared awareness is, right? Or tacit coordination, and you see those kind of themes pop up when we have an event like yesterday. But I'm excited. We're going to start, really. I would say it's a mini series, if you will, here on this question about what should I do now? And it's a question that we are just hearing an awful lot of leaders voice. Where should I be? So, Luke, you kind of want to give us some insight. Like, why are we hearing this question? What are you seeing out there in the workforce? And where should our head be right now?
Yeah, so I think a few things are converging. The Great Resignation, Great Reshuffle, whatever you want to call it, right? This rethinking of what we value at work. Also, people just being tired, worn out, worn down. There's this sense of how long are we going to have to keep pivoting? We kind of put ourselves in firefighting mode for 2 years, and like, is it just forever? And I don't really know what to do. I think we know it's a while longer. We don't know what's going to happen. And leaders feeling those things, sometimes struggling to fill positions, just like to keep a shift open or keep operations moving or keep deliverables going out to customers. And that day-to-day struggle and just saying like, how do I turn this into actionable knowledge? I have all this data. feelings of people, feelings that I have as a leader, trends that I see happening, unpredictability. I've got all this data, but I'm struggling turning that into actionable knowledge, insight, wisdom in, okay, how do I lead now? How do I make decisions now? How do I think further than next week right now? So when we talk about what should I do now in this series, that's really the kinds of questions that we want to answer and talk through. And listen, there's no right answer. We're figuring it out just as much as, in the same place as a lot of other people. But I do think the conversation has value. How do we prioritize what should I do right now when I have to think about next week? And it's on the edge, right? If I'm going to be able to meet my commitments or not for next week, I have to think about it. And I also know as a leader, I have to be thinking about something else. And I need to be directing my efforts towards something that provides some sort of longer term return.
Right.
Yeah.
Hannah, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what I hear Luke share. There's a lot of fatigue out there right now in general, right? For all the reasons Luke described. And it can sometimes be hard to see light at the end of the tunnel, right? We work with some organizations that, okay, they made it through COVID lockdowns and they're kind of getting back on an upswing, and then some other big event happens that kind of just like puts them at their knees because we're already so fatigued and we're just so hopeful. We made it through this first crisis and now we're in crisis mode again. And how can we build, do we have the resilience to make it through yet another crisis? And if not, how can we build that, right? So, yeah, I think both leaders and team members are fatigued, tired, on the brink of burning out. And I think that's why this question is really powerful. What should I do now? Because we could have asked, what can I do now? And we'll probably talk about that too. But what should I do? What is the right thing to do here? Do we just keep pushing? Do we pivot again? Or do we just go do something else?
Yeah. I like that idea. Like, fatigue makes cowards of us all. Mm-hmm. And what I'm seeing is these leaders looking at a team and saying, current state is fatigued.
Yeah.
Current state, I don't know how much more I can ask of them. Current state is the read that these leaders are getting and creating some sense of being stuck. So on a personal level, I think kind of getting stuck in our head, we're dead, right?
Yeah.
But that's effectively these leaders viewing their team, like trying to take themselves outside of the jar, so to speak, to read the label. And they're labeling their teams as fatigued, weary, tired, right? All these things, struggling. But it's effectively the same as getting stuck on where we are and staring at a problem.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what we're going to cover in this series is about reflecting, right, on the truth of our story and looking ahead to where we're going.
Yeah. Getting
out of this state of just staring at the label.
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of my read on why this question is so prevalent. Is it's not really connecting in a moment. It's not having dialogue in a moment. It's just staring at the label.
Yeah.
And how do we move past that? And that's why I'm excited to explore some of these things and some of these concepts with you. So the first thing we're going to talk about in this series, specifically on this episode, we're going to dig into learning the truth. Right? As leaders, I think we're looking at, hey, here's what we believe our current state may be for this team or whatever, but let's talk about how we go about learning the truth and what are some of the things that we can do to know what's really going on within our work teams, whether that's the team we lead or the team we're a part of, team one or team two. So let's talk about how we get into that. And kind of with that, I'm going to ask this first question. What are these assumptions that leaders are making right now? What are the key assumptions that might be misinformed?
Yeah, some of them are things we've already talked about, right? They're tired. They're at their end. People don't want to work. And yeah, we can't seem to hire people or keep people. So clearly people just must not want to work because they're done.
Boy, that's an awesome one. I like that. Like, people don't want to work, otherwise they'd be here. Mm-hmm. I want to offer another suggestion. What if the labor market has outpaced your labor model?
Boy.
Like, let's give some thought to that. Does that have any credit? Like, let's take a little analysis of that. What is the market buying relative to jobs that they want? Mm-hmm. And then does my organization offer that type of employment?
Yeah, I think what you're saying here is we need to think about employment as a service, right? Employment as a product that people want. And just like any other product or service, people aren't going to buy the not good ones, right? They're not going to buy it with their time and their attention and their contribution. And what this sparks for me is I heard a lot of leaders talking about the economic stimulus program where people got whatever it was, money every month.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of hope around, man, whenever that program runs out, whenever it gets shut down, then, everyone's going to come back. Right now, everyone's just sitting at home cashing their checks. And I'm curious, like, has that outcome happened now that the program's over?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. To some degree, maybe. I still hear people complaining about not being able to hire people.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone's still short-staffed. And so we've got a number of initiatives going on where it's like, okay, how does this particular organization rethink recruitment, right? And if you're going to rethink recruitment, you have to rethink job structure.
Yep.
Right? And how you work shifts and what markets you have access to. Like, if you're in a market where if you can use, we'll just call it college-aged labor. Like, you can't tap that market with nothing but 8-hour shifts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, college students don't work 8-hour shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about what other parts of the market can't work 8-hour shifts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's all we got. That's what we offer.
Yeah.
For $13 an hour.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't somebody want to do that?
Well,
Broken.
and then,
right.
Yeah, and then the assumption is, people don't want to work, and people are expecting too much. They're too entitled. They're, etc. Those are assumptions as well. And I do hear sometimes this sense of resentment of like, well, yeah, but this is how it's always been, and why should I cater to this, new worker who has like completely unrealistic expectations? And that's a choice in mindset that a leader can make. We can resent that things are changing, and we can be wishful that things were how they used to be, or we can accept reality and recognize that, okay, maybe the product that we offer, which is gainful employment within certain traditional sense, just isn't working anymore.
Well, and that's where I'm going to shout out Dave Owens here and say, we started a conversation many moons ago about what is meaningful work and how do we pare our organizations down to only have meaningful jobs with living wages. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the rub, is the rethinking of all this is employment is a product. Mm-hmm. You put employment or candidacy on the market the same way you put the service or product your business deals in. Mm-hmm. That's the rethink, right? That is the big pivot, because the fatigue really comes from, okay, we're a little short-staffed. Now these players are having to pick up slack, and now I have to start redeploying people from department A to a department they used to work in, leaving the department they were in even shorter staffed and putting more pressure on those people. Now somebody leaves. Now I've got a hell of a mess. Mm-hmm. And I've got people leaving because they're taking on too much work. I'm spreading people out across multiple departments. And like a lot of things about this system, like those enterprises have to constrict to the level that they can support.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But in doing this, if they're going to re-expand, they're going to have to rethink their labor models.
Yeah. Well, and just to give a little bit more color on that case study that you mentioned with Dave Owens, is what I really appreciated about his approach is he viewed technology as a way to minimize jobs, but not to maximize profit.
Right.
But what non-meaningful work can be replaced by technology so that everything left is a very human job where people can find meaning. And by the way, if we've gotten rid of 5 or 10 positions by leveraging technology, we can then justify a true living wage for everyone that remains on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Does it still have ROI, right? Should the business still be more profitable
Right.
with that technology? Absolutely.
Right.
But it's not this, like, that's not the only motivation. The only motivation isn't maximizing profit. It's also care about creating something that matters and a team that matters and work that matters.
Yeah, that should be an outcome, just like profit is an outcome in the service profit chain. It's
Right.
not necessarily the end all be all, but it should be an outcome of doing things right. So what I'm hearing, that we're touching on here are back to our original question about learning the truth. That means, learn the truth about how the people on your team are really doing and what actually motivates them, right? Motivation is an internal, intrinsic value. You cannot really motivate someone. You can inspire someone, but recognize how are people motivated? What is actually meaningful? What is going to create real engagement? Because the truth is that, and Adam Grant talks about this in his book, Give and Take. He talks about burnout and givers versus takers, and how people who give the most, they can become the most burned out, but giving more is actually also an antidote to burnout. But it's not about just keep doing more of the same thing that you were fatigued about. It's about recognizing I'm the kind of person who's motivated by working hard, but I have to be able to see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Or maybe it means I have to shift my energy into doing something different.
Where are you giving? Right.
Where are you giving?
Yep.
That's the big question.
Well, and I think like that calculus is always pretty easy. Like give more, get more.
Mm-hmm.
Like a courageous leader, like we talk about naivety, like is trusting people naive or is trusting people courageous? Well, courageous leaders just give. And they're intentional about where they give, but the calculus is always the same. Give more, get more.
Yeah.
It's not just get.
Right.
Like that's not how life works. And that's similarly to what we're talking about with these teams. And what we're doing about helping our teams is, you're right, like they are not in a position for us to extract upon further. So now is effectively the time for people to say, courageous leaders say, how can I give to this team, or in what manner do I need to give to this team in order for them to be rejuvenated, to reform, to start moving forward again?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a conversation. Maybe that's something structural. Maybe that's comp. Maybe that's benefits. Maybe that's a bonus plan. Don't know. That's unique to each organization. But I think it can range anywhere from it's a conversation to it's something structural in our model.
Yeah. And that's because high performers are motivated. Like high effort in itself is a motivator to some extent, right? But it has to be something that feels energizing when you've been doing the same thing over and over again. So sometimes it means giving people additional assignments, but in a different way, or in a different field, or in a different department where they feel like they can continue to make a difference. And then the other side of learning the truth is what we talked about earlier, right? What is the truth about the labor market in general? People, quote unquote, out there, right? How do I attract them into the organization? So that's another area where it's important to learn the truth and not just hold assumptions.
Yeah, I think it's that case for if we lack academic rigor, then we're not going to have truth. But we have to spend time building an understanding around things. And that's now we start to scratch at what do I need to understand about my consumer market? What do I need to understand about the labor market? What about this particular vertical that I'm operating within? But how do we learn these truths? Right. And let's get to some of the tactical things. Like if I'm a leader, how do I learn the truth about what's going on within my team? Well, specifically, what's happening here? How do I know what's happening here? I see a lot of leaders assuming they know what's happening here. How do I know for a fact things that I can take to the bank? Because I hear directors, line level managers saying, I'm burned out, or morale is low. And what I know is courageous leaders create culture. Mm-hmm. And when I hear leaders saying those words, it's abdicating accountability for that morale, for that culture. Mm-hmm. And then understanding, and we'll talk about moral injury as part of this series, but when you hear burnout, is it really moral injury?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Understanding those differences. But what we're talking about right here is how do I get to understand those differences? What are the things I need to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I bring up the case of stimulus money. Because if you bought into that narrative of, well, people are sitting at home getting a check and that's why they're not applying to work here, and then stimulus money went away and people still aren't applying to work here, that's fine. It's fine that was an answer that we were supplied and we believed it. But without the data, you don't know if that was true or not. Is your open position count, did it actually go down? Did your time to fill actually go down whenever that stimulus money came? Is your retention of, executing people moving from a new hire to past that 90 days, transitionary period, did that rate go up? So those are things that you can and should know if you want to know the truth. And that's a small example with the stimulus money. But I think our point is you can know the truth, and there are ways to get that data to do it. And so I'm just going to jump into some of those data things first. Please, as an example. So our turnover rates, if we haven't been tracking that, you should be able to figure that out. If you need help calculating that, you can call us or anyone else who knows how, or Google it. It's not difficult. But what's your turnover rate? What's our cost to hire? So some of this is just understanding what's the true cost of building the workforce that we need. And a lot of people don't know. We've been involved with large organizations. They don't know what it costs to fill a position. Mm-hmm. They just kind of know, well, we've got 10 recruiters working and, we fill about 1,500 positions every year. But they don't have any idea 1,500 times what? What's the cost for everyone that leaves? They don't know. So what are those true expenses? How many open positions do you have? And you should be able to chart that. What's your trailing 12 month? What's trend
over time, right?
Right. And, other qualitative information, do you do exit interviews? Right. Do you do stay interviews with your best people? And I'm going to transition a little bit to surveying your workforce right now. Yeah. Do you have actual information over time of what people think of their satisfaction level? There are benchmarkable things with just one survey question, the Net Promoter Score. You can have something that you can benchmark to other organizations in your industry. And you can also, if you ask it often enough, see trends over time. This isn't a happy story, but we have one organization we're working with, and they have been tracking Net Promoter Score about every other month for the last year and a half. And right now, things aren't pretty. They've gone from a really high net promoter score to a negative net promoter score.
Mm-hmm.
But wouldn't you want to know that as the leader?
Right.
Don't you want to know I have a negative net promoter score? And I don't want to get into all like how do you score it and what does it mean? Just
call us about that.
Trust me
Yeah.
that a negative net promoter score is bad.
Yeah.
You are in trouble. People are getting ready to leave. Like it's not good. But isn't it much better to actually know that
Right.
than have a feeling about it? Isn't it actually much better to know it used to be 80 at one point and now it's negative whatever it is? Like that's helpful even though it's hard. Mm-hmm. And some of these knowing the truth things that you should dig in and learn the truth, they might be hard. They might paint a hard picture or they might paint a hopeful picture. You might find that, when I went and talked to my team and surveyed or whatever, like people are still really grateful to be here. And yeah, they're tired. And yeah, I see that tiredness, but they know that everywhere else, people like all their friends and family working other places are having just the same struggles or maybe worse. And so like they're in it for the long haul with us. We have trust here. You might find that, but finding where you land and what the truth is important. So any other thoughts about like surveys, like, just to learn the truth?
I mean, if you don't know something, the best way to find out is just to ask, right? So you can ask in a survey, or you can also literally just have the conversations one-on-one with the people close to you in your team, or as a, depending on which level of leader in the organization, just go up to people, sit down with them, like have lunch with them, have a conversation, ask, how are you really doing? What does it mean to you to be here? What is most meaningful about your work? What are some things that are on your mind right now? Right? Literally have conversations with people. And yeah, I do believe in collecting data more on a more large scale via surveys, etc. But I do think there's something to be said for just having conversations.
Right. And one of my favorites, very tongue in cheek, is, the directors that come up and say, here are our problems. Here's what's happening right now. Yeah, are you doing one-on-ones with all of your direct reports every week? Well, no, but here's what's happening right now, right? Like, I'm reading this from my office.
Yeah.
I know because all the people with grievances come and sit in this chair, and that's what I'm bringing to my team. One is, these things that really aren't that valid.
Yeah.
Is this a 2-person story or is this 20 people's story?
Yeah. How common is it for that person to come back? Everyone's real upset.
Man, morale is down, bro.
I'm just letting you know that it's hard out there.
Man, burned out.
Yeah.
People are burned out.
There's a term for that. It's called herding. So this is one form of herding. So herding comes from this idea, like if you've ever seen a sheepdog, right? And they're like...
Or a corgi.
Or a corgi, right? And the sheep are just kind of like, they're eating grass. They don't have a high level of anxiety. Like they're okay where they are. And then the sheepdog comes and it's like super active, has a lot of energy, and it moves everyone else. Now, the metaphor breaks down a little bit because dogs are smarter than sheep. Hopefully there's no, sheep aficionados out there who are going to write hate mail. But dogs are smarter than sheep. The metaphor breaks down, but with people, oftentimes what we'll see is that if there's a group of folks who aren't really willing to engage in high emotional energy, conflict, whatever, then the least mature or most anxious person in the group will herd everyone to where they want them to go. By complaining, by making issues out of non-issues, by saying what they need, right? And everyone's like, I don't want to deal with it. Fine. Like, let them be on the party planning committee, like whatever. But eventually you end up in this place where, they've herded the team into something that works really well for them and not really well for everyone else. And as leaders, we can be herded by those individuals.
Yeah.
Specifically, when you have 2 directors that are collaborating, right, in a team of 10 directors where you have 10 departments, you've got 2 collaborating and those steer the herd. Because now that senior leader is hearing the same story from more than one touch point, and it's a collaborated, coordinated narrative. Mm-hmm. And like that is red flag. That's why you have to have truth. It's why the surveys are important, whether that is longitudinal, whether that is a pulse survey. It's why one-on-ones are important, like having that expectation. It's why all hands meetings are important. Like, mm-hmm. is that senior leader in front of that team every month, and with that open mic and with that open table? All of these things converge to opportunities to glean truth about what's happening in the organization, amongst your team, etc. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's what we think we know and what we actually know, and what we understand is we don't know a whole lot.
Yeah, and that's why, asking questions not just of the loudest people in the room, right? Because what we will believe is what we hear the most of, and the most vocal voices aren't always representative of the whole truth, right? Mm-hmm. They're certainly representative of some truth, right? But let's find out all the truth. What is the big picture and what's the full picture? Because what happens when we don't know the truth, we make assumptions, but specifically our brains will fill in the gaps, right? Mm-hmm. We'll paint the picture. And what often happens when we have gaps in information, because of our brain's bias towards negativity, because we're excellent threat detectors, we're always looking for what's the next threat, or what is something that could be painful or threatening to me on a physiological level, psychological level. Subconsciously, we're more prone to looking for the negative. And so when we have gaps, our brains are going to fill in typically the picture with fear, uncertainty, doubt, and often make a problem bigger than it actually is. Now, sometimes you can have the opposite too, where as a leader, you walk because you've surrounded yourself with yes people, so you have a rosier than actual truth picture of how things are too, right? If you're afraid to actually dig in and learn the hard things.
Yeah, that reminds me of this psychological experiment. And if you go search like, what are people willing to bet on YouTube, coin flip, you'll probably find this. But they'll just go out on the street, and graduate students will be like, hey, you have to go do this with 100 people today. So I feel sorry for them. They'll go and say, hey, I've got $1. Do you have $1? If I flip this coin, you pick heads or tails. And if it's what you pick, like you get the $1 or $2. If it's what I pick, I get your $1. I have $2. And then people are like, no, I don't want to do that. So they're like, okay, well, I'm going to put in $2. Okay, well, I'm going to put in $3. And what they find is that people are only willing to bet their $1 once it gets up. I mean, consistently, once it gets up to $3, $4, $5, definitely $10. Mm-hmm. So people are much more risk adverse. So what Hannah's saying, focusing on the negative, focusing on what bad thing could happen, than what good thing could happen. Mm. Because completely rationally, as soon as it gets to 2-1, everyone should say yes.
Yeah.
Right? Because you break even.
You have to understand statistics for that.
Yeah.
Though.
Let's not get into the gambling statistics. Okay. I'm just saying, like, we have a bias, like Hannah's saying, and it's been tested and shown. And I mean, if you watch a video, like, you can see the people working it out and their emotions at play against their logical brain. And it's super interesting. And Hannah, I'm kind of curious, like, how do you feel like that plays into our need for certainty and that need to really be able to predict what's going to happen tomorrow? How does that color people's interpretation of what they think is actually happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a big part of coloring our interpretation, right? And when we look, and we've talked about the SCARF construct of the social threats, right? Which are status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. Okay, I had to pull those out of my
great job
my head real fast. But those are things. They're 5 things that are important to us to feel psychologically safe, to feel at ease. And for some of us, some of those are stronger than others, right? And so for some people, being able to feel certain about what's going to happen next, having predictability, stability, those are really important, and we act accordingly. But on some level, we all need to feel safe. Our nervous systems are either in connect mode or protect mode at any point during the day, right? So recognizing what's happening when we're in a protective state versus a connective state. And that's part of emotional intelligence for leaders as well.
Well, this is learning the truth about what's actually happening requires labor. Mm-hmm. And it requires all the kinds of labor. I have to spend time building the survey. Mm-hmm. I've got to analyze results. I've got to bring in a lot of qualitative information from what other leaders are speaking to about their one-on-ones. Mm-hmm. I have to execute those all hands. It sounds like a lot of work. But abdicating that accountability is what creates opportunity for other people doing business in your vertical.
Yeah.
Where are your employees going to go? The reason why we're having challenges, the first organizations to fill are going to be the ones that know what they believe. Mm-hmm. They have their truths. So this idea that every leader, and this is my main point for today, every leader, every courageous leader accepts personal responsibility for understanding the truth of what's happening within their team. And they deploy these tools to learn what those truths are, in addition to any other tools that they've developed themselves.
Yeah, so I think you're right.
I know I'm right.
I know you do.
Know the truth.
I'm hurting right now. See how I'm hurting?
But there's a deeper level to this, which is around mindset, I think.
Sure.
Because I think one of the primary barriers to learning the truth is this fear that I'm not going to have the answer once I learn the truth. Mm. So it's like if the check engine light goes on my vehicle, I'm like, how bad is this really?
Let me keep driving and see.
Because about the last thing I want to do is take it somewhere and them tell me the truth that I need a new transmission. And that's going to be really uncomfortable because I'm not going to know if they're honest or not. And it's going to be expensive and all of these things that I do not feel equipped to deal with. Right. And so I just keep driving.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for a lot of leaders, that's where we get, if we're afraid to learn the truth because of we might not have the answer, that's a mindset thing. The alternative to that is my check engine light comes on and I respond with curiosity. Well, I don't know a lot about cars, but I'm curious, this one seems to not be operating as effectively as it could. It's not at the performance level that it should be. I wonder what I need to learn to be able to fix this and move it to highest performance possible. And am I going to need help with that? Sure. Maybe they're going to tell me something if I take it into the shop, and I'm going to have to go home and research and learn. And, I'm going to have to ask them, well, what codes did it give you? I might have to do some work and learn, but I'm curious, can I get this thing back to peak performance? And that's a mindset thing. It's being willing to not have all the answers and not be right all the time. It's being willing to ask for help. It's caring more about performance and the outcome than it is about security and certainty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, look, I want to share a little bit of a personal story, right? And pull thread, how does this apply personally? Yes, we're talking about it here in the team sense, but when I was 32 years old, I'm just going on about life. I'm a young adult, healthy, active, everything is good. And then one night my side started hurting. And I'm like, okay, it was a one night thing. And then it happened once a month, my side would hurt. And it would keep me up, and then I'd get 25, 26 days of sleep, and it would happen again. And then it started like every week. And I'm like, man, something's like wrong, you know? And I'm like, but if I go to the doctor, they're going to tell me what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it started hurting like every day. And then like I wasn't sleeping at all. And I was still like, if I go to the doctor, they're going to tell me what it is. And like, I'm really afraid about what it is. Mm-hmm. And this goes on for more than a year. And I'm just getting like sicker and sicker. And one day I woke up and I'm like I had to go to the hospital. Like it wasn't an option anymore. And like come to find out, like it was my gallbladder. Right. And how many people, like it seems like a super routine surgery, but here I go along and I almost die from a gallbladder removal because like it was so sick and had been sick for so long. And then like I go learn the truth, I get it out. Next day, you know, I had to stay in the hospital 3 days for a gallbladder removal just so they could get like all the infection and stuff out of my body. Like one, you know, really rare for somebody that's 32 years old, just some freak occurrences in the plumbing that happened. But like, I didn't want to know the truth. I was afraid of the truth. Mm-hmm. And ultimately it nearly ended my existence. Mm-hmm. So that interplay between how we think about things personally and how we think about things within our team, like it is a mindset thing. Mm-hmm. Do I really want to know the truth? Do I really want to deal with the actions after I understand? Mm-hmm. Or is it easier to accept everyone's distant feedback about here's what I project what's going on? Is it easier to be herded?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to apply your parable to, you know, if I'm a leader and something's going wrong, there's probably some sort of fear that crops up about myself. Am I going to lose my job if I find out that these 3 people don't like me as a leader? Am I going to find out that I'm not a good leader? And I don't know how to fix that if I find that out. Am I going to find out that the way that I like to do things is not how my team likes to do things? And then I'm going to be forced with a choice. If I find that out, either I'm going to have to change or I'm going to have to knowingly violate what they want. Like those are all, you know, there's probably a dozen other potential fears of what we might find out. But do we really want to have to drive it into the ground before we find out? Do we really want to cause all that damage along the way to ourselves, to other people? A growth mindset would say, the sooner we learn the truth, the sooner we're able to grow and meet the challenge.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I just want to say, like, if you're listening to this, like, you can do it.
Right.
You are capable of growing, changing, rising to this challenge. Will you need help possibly? Yeah, we all need help with things that are hard when the game has changed, when we've reached the peak of what we can do with the skills that we learned when we were young, right? We have to learn and grow, but you can do it if we have the courage to learn the truth.
Exactly. I want to offer one tool that can help with that, right? And this is why we keep saying leadership takes courage, right? It is a courageous act. And it means we sometimes have to dig into some things that feel really uncomfortable or scary. And by the way, to some extent, we're all wired that way, right, Chris? We don't want to know if something is really going to be harmful to us. Some people are more willing to uncover those things than others. I know for me, I like to focus on what's positive. So I go along and I focus on what feels great and what's positive. And I don't really always like to dig into things that are uncomfortable. And we're all wired that way to larger and lesser extents, right? And so one tool that I've found really helpful when it comes to that is if there's something that is kind of looming that's making me hesitate or feels really scary on some level. Because a lot of this happens subconsciously, right? Some of the questions you mentioned, Luke, what might go through your mind, it may not even surface on a conscious level, but somewhere in your subconscious, those are the fears and the things that are going on. So I learned this actually from Tim Ferriss, which is go to the worst possible outcome that could happen. Just go there. Okay, if I really did lose my job over this, what would happen? How would I respond? What is the worst that could happen, right? And I actually went through that exercise when I was considering leaving the corporate world and starting my own business, right? There was some hesitation because I was like, well, what if I don't make it? Okay, what if I don't make it? Well, guess what? I can go take another job.
Yeah, go back to doing what you were doing before, right?
So then I surfaced that fear consciously and thought about what are all the possible things that could happen. And then I found I wasn't so afraid because now I was able to think proactively, right? But it does take an intentional effort to surface fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And then it becomes tangible and we can do something about it.
Yeah. Well, and I think I totally connect with both of those ideas. The idea of growth mindset, right? And hey, the sooner I know, the quicker I can do something about it. And yeah, I think I was actually 30 years old at the time, so I would say a lot of development was still yet to happen. I would hope that today, faced with that same scenario, I'd be there tomorrow.
Right.
Right. And I think that's the beauty of growing as a person and, somewhat the effect of years, like just experiencing more, becoming wiser. Like that's the intent. And then that idea of going there, like, okay, assuming that worst possible scenario, I guess what? Like, my stakeholder never changes. Regardless of what position I'm in because I'm anchored to a purpose. It doesn't matter what condition or location I am in. The reason I am here today does not change.
Right.
And I think that's how we kind of bring purpose into this idea of exploring truth. Like once you know the truth, you know where to apply that purpose at. So, well, let's wrap up this idea of why we need to know the truth, and let's just get a key takeaway. What are your final thoughts, Luke, or what are you taking away from today's conversation?
Yeah, so we're calling this series "What Should I Do Now?" And I think the takeaway is, what can you do now, today, like literally today? What could you do to learn a little bit more about the truth? That probably means a conversation or calling someone for help or, just checking in or looking at some data that you haven't looked at for a while. So what can you do today with 5 or 10 or 15 minutes to learn the truth?
Yeah, my key takeaway is respond with curiosity. Luke, you mentioned that, and I think that's so key to all of this, right? Ask yourself some questions. What if the truth is what I fear? And first of all, what are my fears? What is my uncertainty? Where's my doubt coming from? And what if it's actually true? Well, then what can we do? And so just respond with curiosity and surface the fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
My takeaway is I know what hurting is now. Typically I would say there's a lot of projection, right? When you hear those stories of, oh, everyone is this or all is that. And those are red flag words, right? When everyone is down and all the guests are this and all the employees are that. I'm like, red flag, red flag, red flag. I'm just going to kick them out of my office from now on. That's a key takeaway. Just get out of my office right now. Go build a better story and come back. I don't like your narrative. No, I think, I kind of called to Steve Laswell here. We have to create space to reflect on the truth in the story. In order for that space to be productive, we have to have the truth from the story. So how do you as a leader, what is your method What is your process for learning truth? That's what, like, I know what mine is, but mine doesn't necessarily help someone else. What is you as a courageous leader? What is your process for knowing the truth? And that's what we have to get to. So,
okay, I know we're trying to wrap up here, but we should have said this earlier. There's a piece of this that's like, what habits did you drop when all the shit hit the fan that you need to pick back up? Yeah. Because if you were doing an all hands, if you were doing an annual or monthly or whatever employee survey, and you were like, oh, we don't have time for that, pandemic, right? Maybe that was a mistake. I don't know if it was or not. Maybe it was the right choice, but like, pick it back up and start executing again.
Right.
So there is that piece of, we have to normalize the chaotic world that we're in to some degree and say the fundamentals are still the fundamentals. Even if we can't predict what's going to happen next month, we still need some of that fundamental data and activity. If we stopped doing all hands, like at some point you got to do all hands. If we stop doing one-on-ones, at some point you got to like do one-on-ones. And so I'm not trying to say let's become who we were, because I think who we are going to become as organizations is much more interesting, and we should be really curious and engaged in what that's going to be. But also the fundamentals of how do I learn the truth, like we're going to have to just execute them. So there's also that piece of just pick up what you maybe dropped for a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. And then if you're in one of those industries or verticals that is, achieving success due to this, like don't let it hide the hickeys, right?
Yeah.
Because someday this ride comes to an end and you're going to have to operate and be super intentional again.
Yep.
And you don't want to start completely over. So there's some of these like high demand sort of issues that are hiding organizational and team health problems in a number of places. And then let's not get caught off guard, as the market moves out from under us.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we're ready to go compete.
Well, and all the people that didn't learn it as fast as you learn the new model, they're going to copy you. And so you have to keep creating, like, what is your long-term value prop to your team? So yeah, like don't just bask in it. Learn.
Meanwhile, we have arrived.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Province, Hannah Bratteroo and Luke Freeman, and produced by Ben West. Theme music is by Evan Grimm. Title track Fake Love available on Apple Music, and this podcast was recorded at Storycatcher Studio with video and audio editing and production support by Brad O'Hara and Alicia Crum, with inspiration, strategy and technical support by yours truly, Neil Hughes. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. You can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com, and remember, previous episodes are available at magicintheroom.com.